Alright, my Spotify Wrapped. Let's see what I listened to this year. What? I think something's wrong here. Isn't this supposed to be about music? This doesn't make any sense. Alright, forget about all this. I'm gonna go review a Dodge Durango. Wait a minute, you don't make any sense either! Who? Who is this for? Who could this possibly be for? Typically, I'd say it takes confidence to make something boring. It takes the same kind of self-assured character that goes into being popular. To know that you can do uninteresting things because you're already set. You're buoyed by the high tides of goodwill. But I don't think Dodge really had that confidence. Not then, and certainly not now. Which is why they couldn't just do a boring, straightforward SUV. They had to make it kind of a sporty muscle car too, because being boring is, well, it's boring. But then it creates a sort of mixed message, right? Because again, who is this for? New dads? Overpaid security guards? Underpaid medical professionals? Firearm influencers? How? How is this a young family chariot when it goes from 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds? How are you a dad already? You're 3 years removed from reading with your finger under each word. What are we even doing here? The Dodge Durango is the car you get when you're too young for the VFW, but too old for that mini fridge in your dad's garage. You know, this car is an identity crisis on 4 wheels. This is the automotive equivalent of a roommate who took an edible and experienced derealization during finals week. Because this has no idea what it is, because logic doesn't apply, you know? They told me I couldn't be a Charger. They told me I couldn't be a family crossover. They told me I couldn't take that WRX down to Gapplebee's, but through the power of the Lord and our fighting men and women, I believed in myself. And now those tire marks are on 76 West for all eternity. Hell yeah, brother! So really, what was Dodge going for here? What's the history behind this motorized collection of nouns and adjectives? And is it better than expected, or exactly what you'd think? Well, I'm the Roman. This is Race to the Bottom, and today I'm driving the 2018 Dodge Durango SRT 392 as I continue my search for the worst car in the world.
And hoop-dee-doo and dickory dodge, don't forget when you check your garage that what you're seeing is not a mirage. You'll be driving Dodge Durango now.
Dodge Durango. I was gonna get a Trailhawk, but then I saw this on Carvana. It just barely fit on the delivery truck. The neighbors were coming out of their house to have a look. I door-dashed a Dodge. This car is like somebody put a Dodge Caliber on a bulking diet. I see something like this, and I'm worried I'm about to get beer recommendations from a guy in an Under Armour shirt with bootcut jeans tucked into his Garmont Bifidas, and the recommendation is going to be Michelob Ultra. There's a certain cognitive dissonance happening here, you know, because it's hard to hold the conflicting ideas of this Dodge inside my brain simultaneously without getting the kind of headache I need an Angela White video to solve. You have this big pushrod V8, naturally aspirated, and it's got dimensions and power that will appeal to the jorts and tribal tattoos crowd. But it's also got an encouraging amount of space to go along with performance that, for a 3-row SUV, is shockingly agile. I mean, you would think the aerodynamics of this thing would be far worse than they actually are. But on the highway, I was dashing like Santa the year he accidentally slept in. It's just weird because aesthetically, I don't like this. I don't like the clumsy size, which dampens some of the fun of driving this. I don't like the interior, which has its relative comfort dampened by hard plastics and just this bland look, like it wants to appear contemporarily state of the art. without having to commit to the cost that it would take to actually look nice and contemporary, tech forward. This is obviously just a single LED panel for the gauge cluster, but as our volunteer Nick pointed out to me, also Nick, they added bezels to make it look like separate screens for whatever reason. And that's not even all of the unusual design choices they went with that just create headaches where none need to exist. Like how the second row captain's chairs can't be swapped out for bench seats due to differences in the floor mounting brackets, or how the battery is obnoxiously located under the front passenger seat. And what's this? A cowl vent panel that's just large enough for mice to crawl inside and die? Yes, Nick has actually experienced this, apparently. And while you get heated seats, which are nice, you gotta cycle through the touchscreen to get to them. In fact, it's a whole bunch of obnoxious menus oversaturating the user experience, because we're going to have technology encroach on your daily drive, but we're not going to make it intuitive. Adaptive cruise control will bring you to a full stop, but self-cancel after 3 seconds, so have fun suddenly rolling forward. Also, parking nose in sounds like a pain in the ass, because the front park sensors will beep to let you know you're getting close to hitting something. But those beeps acknowledging front obstacles, they don't cancel when you throw this in reverse, leaving you constantly on edge that you're about to back into something. And I get it, just do it classic style with your eyes, but then why even have this feature in the first place? You're just adding demerits to an otherwise good car. Yes, a good car! I've said it, I can't unsay it! Is it the best ride quality? No. But I found myself enjoying this far more often than not, even if eco mode feels like a tax on this transmission, which isn't particularly great to begin with. Never mind the horribly anachronistic torque flight name, this 8-speed automatic transmission is what essentially prevents this from greatness. Because getting down to brass tacks, I really like this engine. This is the 6.4 liter, or 390.55 cubic inch. It's around there. Either way, it's enough for the 392 badges to not technically be lying, because I guess we round up in this family. You get 475 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. Unleaden, that is, because yes, you can absolutely tow things with this. You get 8,700 pounds to work with, because that boat has to get to the water somehow, right? I get why this would be useful, particularly for someone who needs this to transport other cars, like Nick does. But that's also where one of the car's shortcomings stares you right in the face. While trailing his Nash Metropolitan from Florida, Nick was averaging a whopping 8 miles per gallon. 8 miles per gallon? Those are like 80s Bronco numbers. Now, the fuel economy is factory rated at 13 city and 19 highway, although Nick normally gets around 9 to 10 city and around 15 highway in his regular driving. And so, if I'm honest, I was kind of expecting worse. But then the poor fuel economy is made worse by this big boy fuel tank, which is about 25 gallons, because again, this is a family that rounds up. Which means this Durango is expensive enough to fill as it is, yet it gets even worse when you realize this wants a minimum of 89 octane. And really, premium is recommended if you want to get the most out of this thing. And for as fun as it is to drive something this large, this fast, and it is fun. The Dodge Durango hasn't always had the best reputation for mechanical consistency. Anecdotal, yes, but the transfer case exploded about a week after Nick bought this in January 2023, and the local Chrysler dealership said it was from mismatched tires because the all-wheel drive system is as fragile as one of those public toilet seat covers. Thankfully for Nick, the Durango was still covered with just 2 weeks left on the 5-year, 60,000-mile powertrain warranty. So that was a relief. But then Nick learned that the car had been traded in to a Kia dealership, who then turned it around and put it up for auction. And that's how it ended up at the dealership Nick got it from. And look, this wouldn't necessarily raise red flags on its own, but this Durango was offloaded onto the auction house in 2020, at a time where everyone was leaving claw marks on their inventory from holding on so damn tightly to everything they had in stock, because 2020 was an uncertain time, and nobody knew what the market was going to look like in a year, in 2 years, in ever again. Now, in hindsight, that should have been the first sign that something wasn't entirely on the up and up with this car. But Nick didn't know all of that at the time, so he had to discover the car's issues firsthand, such as the touchscreen delaminating, resulting in constant phantom touches, or the LEDs on the center light bar on the tailgate going out due to water intrusion. This car didn't have issues, it had a subscription. Literally, because some of the features were paywalled, because that's the kind of hell we're barreling towards, you know? A lot of automakers are going to do exactly what the public and consumers allow them to get away with. But by the same token, a lot of automakers, got us by both grapefruits, because we don't really have the option to just say, oh, we're not going to pay this. We're not going to, unless we're just deciding we're not going to buy new cars anymore. But the problem is that some of the cars now landing on the used market are the new cars that first started implementing paywalled features. So even if we go back to try to, buy used cars, some of those features are going to be locked behind a subscription. That's just the way it's going to be. And I'm not entirely sure what the solution is, because I don't know that some sort of mass protest, some mass boycott is even really viable. Maybe if people just buy the new cars but don't engage with any of the price hiking subscription services, then maybe they'll rethink locking them behind a paywall, but by then they've already sold the car. Sure, maybe they won't be able to get money out of you in perpetuity, but they've already gotten a pretty hefty sum out of you once. But I digress, because this is actually kind of a funny, well, okay, it's not a funny story, it's just a unique story, because the only silver lining for Nick was the assurance by the salesman that his dealership would take care of any of the number of known problems these vehicles were said to have. But the salesman apparently never got approval from management to make this promise, and he ended up getting fired for it. Which I can't help but feel bad. I mean, regardless of the circumstances, I never like to see anybody lose their job. But that's still kind of a wild promise to make if you don't have the authority to make it. So anyway, how did Nick end up in a car with more problems than a math test? Well, it's a combination of his needing an SUV and having a second child on the way. Mind you, I had planned to make the young families comparison before I even knew he had a family, so Nick, buddy, please know that I'm not lobbing these grenades at you directly. You're a hell of a guy, and I appreciated you volunteering this Durango for this. Now, as Nick explained to me, he didn't want an SUV, but the sedan wasn't cutting it for family needs anymore, and when you factor in all the space and the towing capacity, and features like heated and cooled seats, and particularly the adaptive cruise control for those long hauls to visit family, this seemed like as good an SUV as any. And admittedly, he's a bit of a Mopar guy, having grown up in an area where the muscle car scene permeated every aspect of the local car culture. But since that scene was largely overrun with Ford and GM vehicles, Mopar seemed like this obscure, attractive alternative to go against the local grain, I completely get it. I grew up around Chrysler and Dodge dealerships. Those were the main ones in my area around the house where I lived. Chrysler and Dodge was all I ever got to. I mean, no wonder my dream car is an AMC Eagle. I mean, how would it end up any other way than that? So anyway, Nick's first car ended up being a 74 Charger SE, which is really damn cool as far as first cars go. So I can see the vision in staying in the Mopar family, because this still carried this bizarre, muscular Mopar spirit, As Nick described it to me, Mopar guys respect that it's an actual SRT and not just an SXT that's been clapped out and covered in stripes. And that makes sense. This is having your cake and eating it too. And you know what? This would actually be top 5 if it had a manual transmission. Probably right at the bottom, at number 5, but it'd still be on there. because this thing moves. I mean, why does a 3-row family hauler have launch control? What the hell is this car? Like, something this big and ungainly should probably have worse handling, but this is actually pretty damn nice. It's like Dodge spent the better part of 4 model generations getting this right, and they've mostly done it towards the end of its life. Because, as you see, my friends, the Durango was introduced in 1997 for model year 1998, and it will be saying goodbye in 2024. This is pretty much the end of the line. Now, it wasn't until the second generation that it got the 5.7-liter Hemi option, and it wasn't until the third generation that buyers were given the choice between a V6 or a V8 engine. It also wasn't until the third generation that this got 3 rows, and thus we find ourselves here, in the third generation, blazing down the highway in a car that was initially designed to replace the Ram Charger vehicle lineup when it was discontinued. But for as all-encompassing as this tries to be, the public just didn't really respond to it in the way that would justify its continued existence. I guess at the end of the day, I'm kind of bewildered that this car even lasted as long as it did, because it feels like a clash between the warring concepts of adulthood and frivolity. In theory, this is what you get when you're trying to insulate yourself for the future. Because it's good for family, it's good for hauling stuff, it's good for its utility. Yet it also allows you to overtake sedans and run red lights with reckless abandon. It's got an engine that's the devil on your shoulder, and this devil's got a megaphone half the time. As I'm driving it, and generally having a great time in this otherwise responsibility-laden car, I just think, and this is a sentiment I've seen expressed all over social media in the past year, but which seems more pronounced even now, is, how are we the new adults? How are we the grown-ups now? Okay, so I'm 39, right? And I feel like people in their 30s generally had this stoic maturity when I was growing up. That the bursts of good humor and latitude were subordinate to things like fiscal responsibility and following rules and don't laugh at that, it's not funny, show some respect kind of lectures. Yet it feels like this car exists at the intersection between traditional adult masculinity and this new bullshit where we're adults in the linear sense, but we're less self-assured. We retreat into humor more. And it makes us seem more childish, even though we still value the same things, generally speaking. Those adult things, like getting our bills paid, being fiscally responsible, or trying to be, trying to take care of our family and ourselves, those things still matter to us. And maybe it's a harder world in which to achieve those things. I don't know, I'm not trying to be a philosopher. But I guess there's a cynicism to modern adulthood. This edge that is hard to sand down, that we use humor to try and sand down. And sometimes maybe we seek out these types of vehicles that allow us to fulfill our responsibility while still allowing us to have these moments of frivolity, of buoyancy, of just fun. It's an SUV that thinks it's a Charger. Like, that's hilarious, but it's also kind of exhilarating in a weird way. Yet I feel like I would enjoy this more without the years of cynicism Stellantis has baked into the consumer, to where you can't trust that they could actually make anything good, because the best things they make tend to just be magnets for social scorn. I still don't know anybody who gives half a simmering shit about a Cummins, even if it is a fine truck when it needs to be. And maybe we generally shouldn't care about what other people think. We should have the confidence to be equal parts boring and cavalier, because it's our lives and we're the ones who are going to have to answer for how we lived them. So why not be like a Dodge Durango, a collection of contradictions that proves your virility by virtue of procreation, while challenging it, because if you were really about that Mopar life, Kevin, no amount of offspring could talk you into an SUV, Kevin! But life is about compromise, and there's something far more noble. Come in close. I want to talk to you. There's something far more noble and masculine about compromise. Even as they find a vehicle that both embraces and circumvents that compromise. That masculine man, yeah, brother, he's getting his reps in, but you know what? He's still making it to the Little League game. He's still there with the orange slices and the Capri Suns. He shows up for Mopar, and brother, let me tell you, he's going to show up for his family. And look, I don't really know if I'm making sense here, but what I can tell you is that this is only the second car since beginning the official top 5 and bottom 5 lists that falls squarely in the ass crack of the race to the bottom. Thank you for the category suggestion, Nick. Why am I still whispering? This isn't in the top 5 because while I enjoyed my time with it, it never felt like a top 5er. You know, it never felt like a bottom 5 car either, so ass crack it is. The Dodge Durango is a fun experience. I enjoyed driving it, and I imagine I would have continued to enjoy it if I had to go on a long drive, on a road trip somewhere. I would have been glad of the ability to just pack the car to my heart's content, no deficits whatsoever, and that I had the comfort and convenience of all these little creature comforts, you know, like heated and cooled seats, the adaptive cruise control, the power sunroof, plenty of acceleration, far more than a car of this size should probably be able to muster. But by the same token, I don't know that I was really all that excited by it. I just had this sort of respect for what it could do and how well it could do it. But there wasn't really affection there. There wasn't really reverence. And that's okay. Not every car gets on a list. But that doesn't mean they don't deserve to exist. I did not mean for that to kind of rhyme. But on the subject of that, the 2024 RCR Christmas song is now available to stream everywhere. It's called Near Love 2024 version. It's probably only the second RCR Christmas song in history that is kind of serious. I've linked the behind the scenes video in the description, but if that's not really your thing, no biggie. And as a reminder, you know, YouTube has reset notifications again, so if you'd previously tapped the bell icon to receive all notifications, you might need to tap it again, just in case you're wondering why RCR videos aren't showing up in your feed, or why you aren't getting notifications of new videos like you used to. Tapping that bell icon is one of the best ways you can help keep this show going. But if you want to support the show in a bigger way and see it continue further in 2025, please consider Patreon. The link is in the description. Beginning in January, we'll be posting some exclusive videos up in there. For example, Brian's reaction to this car, his review, you'll be able to watch and find out this coming January. But I do want to thank you for watching and for supporting RCR. And I want to thank Nick for volunteering his car and for providing a wonderful shooting day. Thank you for watching. I appreciate every single one of you who've given me a chance, and I promise to keep doing my best not to make you regret that decision. Have an amazing rest of your week. I'm a tangle of apologies to you, and I'll make it right before the light sneaks through. I will let go of the past, grab the future with both my hands, and be near love, be near love, be near love, and be near love, be near love, be near love.